Yeah, I'd say that the thing that I would say is, ultimately, when you're interviewing for these roles, ultimately you're asking kind of the person across the table from you to hire you because you have something differentiated to offer. And so I think it's really important to be able to articulate exactly what that is. What do you bring to the table that other people don't? And then one piece of advice that I got when I was going through my process was you never enter a conversation where you don't have something to sell or pitch. So I'd say always have 2 or 3 investment ideas in your back pocket that you can talk about when someone says, what's an interesting idea you have, or what kind of ideas are you working on? The worst thing you can say is, I haven't thought about that yet. I'm just focused on getting a job. That's definitely not going to get you a job.
Agree with that. I also put an emphasis on the interpersonal side of things. Like, I don't think you can ever underestimate the value of your personal network and getting to know as many people as possible and being genuinely curious about their job and those people, right? So at the end of the day, the way I've recruited for jobs has changed pretty drastically. So like when I was doing the lateral jump from Goldman to Blackstone, like that process lasts 48 hours and is a complete nightmare. And so I was just like, okay, I just gotta get through this and like get a job. I think this time around, going from HBS to Aries, I was focused on doing my diligence too, right? So I think at the end of the day, when you're thinking about the place that you're going to go post MBA, the hope, right, the ideal is that's where you're going to make your career. Like, I'm going to Aries because I want to stay there and I want to be there for an extended period of time. And you want to make sure that cultural fit is as close as possible. And so you should be not sell yourself, of course, but be honest about who you are and what matters to you, and ask your future employer the same types of questions, right? And I think that's how you get kind of the most efficient matches, and that's how you have long-term career success. And so really important to sell yourself well, but sell yourself accurately too, because you don't want to show up on the first day and be like, just kidding, I'm a totally different person than you thought I was. So.
I will add to this. I think this kind of, let's start with the MBAs for a second. I think, bifurcates a little bit into people that have maybe prior transaction experience, and Tony and Kelsey both alluded to this. But if you have prior PE experience, kind of that recruiting process for you is probably a little bit more defined as far as like the firms and the types of, and Kelsey, you can comment on this, and you and I have talked about this before, but I think just how that process looks like in your in your second year of your MBA, and in kind of the firms and on campus recruiting, off campus recruiting, and we can get into all those points, and then so that's more defined. So I think it's there, to Kelsey's point, finding the firms and ones that are the best fit for you given your background, and to Matt's point, what you bring to the table. The second group of people, which is probably 60% of the MBAs that are in the audience, that may not have prior PE experience, right? And I've, within Elevate, we've seen tons of success stories of people break into this. Now it really gets down to Matt's point, like, what do you bring to the table, right? Using your background and everything. So if it's industry expertise, if it's some sort of transaction expertise, if it's relationships, to then translate that into building relationships with a lot of these middle market firms who are recruiting for really good talent, but who may not always be on campus, or who may not always have this structured recruiting process. I think there it becomes about investing that time into building those relationships and getting in front of them, and then really making a case for yourself and going through that process. And then finally, I think for the undergrads, again, we'll get to this point, but I think for those, the MBA process or the recruiting process is probably a little bit more structured. Kelsey alluded to this, where it's a little bit of, you have to kind of decide if you want to go through the private equity recruiting process. And then again, the recruiting is very intense, but get yourself prepared for that. Come up with your story that makes sense of why you want to go into PE, and then just go get it. Get the opportunities that are ahead of you. That's probably how I'd summarize it.
I guess I'd also add one more thing to that, which is I think if you come from no transaction experience, or you haven't really had time in the field, there are ways that you can demonstrate proactively that you're interested in private equity. Read the books, read about the transactions, do training the street, like get the credentials that show that you know how to do valuation again, because I think no matter what kind of firm is hiring you, whether it's a mega fund or a middle market or across the spectrum, they want someone who can hit the ground running. So anything you can do to demonstrate that you have that toolkit is going to make you more attractive. And so, there are a lot of different opportunities available to show that you care and you're interested, and to demonstrate that you have the capability and the skill set.